to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be recapping the Canada versus South Africa match of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. But the reaction is a really great celebration for CONCACAF and to the country of Canada of making greatness in the World Cup moving on. It was really a hard match with South Africa, as Stefan Eustáquio getting the game winner clinch goal in the 90th minute of the added third minute in the match. I would have to say this: there's always someone to try to be the one to save the team, and that was Eustáquio. Congrats to him of making Canada win and move on to the round of 16 that will be versing Netherlands or Morocco in that match. And just recapping how Canada performed throughout the group stage. Again, I would have to say, starting out with their first match, Canada versus Bosnia, really a tough match. A lot of people would say that this was going to be easy from the start, but Bosnia was the one who made it really difficult for them in the first half. And then Canada actually finished it off with Kyle Larin being the one to tie the match and getting that first ever FIFA World Cup point. And you look at the second match, Canada versus Qatar, being like the biggest blowout that Canada had in the World Cup, 6-0, being Jonathan David to getting the hat trick in that match. And a lot of people were thinking Jonathan David could be that contender for the Golden Boot race. But looking at it right now, you look at that third match, Canada versus Switzerland, didn't go really well for Canada, losing that match led to them being second in that group. A lot of people wanted Canada to win that matchup, so they would have the chance to actually play in Vancouver once again in the round of 32. But they got South Africa in that matchup. A lot of people thought that they would be versing South Korea also, but that matchup with South Africa probably was one of the most competitive ones we saw in the knockout round. But a lot of people would say Canada versus South Africa kind of looked boring. There's also other things that a lot of people have different views about this matchup. It was, to be honest, a lot of people would look at saying the Canada versus South Africa, of the Canadian fans out there, would say Richie Leary's that got tackled penalty area should have been a penalty kick. But looking at it how I look at it, saying I don't really think that was a penalty kick. I don't think, after looking at it many times, I think it shouldn't have been. But I would say it should have been a corner kick. I think that Canada should have got that corner kick. But again, I think the refs got it wrong on one thing, is that they didn't give Canada the corner kick. And yeah, in the added minutes that of the second half, Stefan Eustáquio being that guy, being the player of the match, that was something. This is something that is going to be historic again for Canada. And yeah, Jesse Marsch is something to also look at saying. But I would have to say this about this Canada match. I think that Canada didn't need Alphonso Davies in that match. If Alphonso Davies didn't play against South Africa, I would think that they would still win. Like, Alphonso Davies didn't have that much possession of the ball in that match. I think, again, lots of people are going to say, well, he didn't have minutes. He didn't play that much minutes in the game. He was starting from the bench. Maybe the next game he's going to be starting. But again, you look at Jesse Marsch, he's still concerned about Alphonso Davies' injury. But again, some things happens. And I think that Alphonso Davies might be a lot of fans are going to say he's going to be the starter for the next match. I think that we could still see better. We could still see better with Canada. But they're going to be playing a side that's going to be more competitive out there. Morocco has been very improving in the World Cup. Netherlands, another country that's really competitive. It might not know how that's going to end up. I've noticed that the Canadian Premier League has came back from the World Cup break. There's always been the question about Canadian soccer fans out there that has Canada soccer improved the popularity for the Canadian Premier League from this. And I still think that the Canadian Premier League trying to promote their league of this popularity and trying to do everything they can to promote the league, I still think that they're not doing enough. And why? Because a lot of people always think that a lot of Canadian soccer fans still don't know yet that they have a professional league. They don't know any of the teams. But again, I always say about, I'm talking about Canadians who still don't know yet. But they're still soccer fans, but are still in the side of Major League Soccer because the popularity, and that's the part that the Canadian Premier League is having troubles with. You look at Toronto FC. Nobody knows what Inter Toronto FC. No one knows them yet. If you look at Vancouver side, nobody knows that much about Vancouver FC. Nobody knows what Pacific FC side. The only reason why they're getting attention is because Pacific FC is the one that made upset of the Vancouver Whitecaps in the Canadian Championship. Calgary FC is getting popularity because they were the first Canadian Premier League side to beat Vancouver Whitecaps. And you look at many other teams in the Canadian Premier League. Atletico Ottawa beating Toronto FC. You look at Forge FC beating Club de Foot Montreal. Still Forge FC, Atletico Ottawa. If you look at Toronto, or maybe the same city that they're from, of these Canadian Premier League teams, are still not known at this point. Toronto FC has a big popularity of being partners with. And you look at Vancouver Whitecaps, really big to bringing academies out there. It's the same thing for Club de Foot Montreal. Again, Toronto FC that I mentioned. That these are the three Canadian teams that they're going to get a lot of attention. But then you look at the Canadian Premier League, it's going to be that slow process for trying to get that popularity. How they're going to, and it's going to be how they're going to gain that popularity. Really how it questions. Beat them so many times. As noticed, Toronto FC has a friendly match with Halifax Wanderers in July. And that's the area Halifax Wanderers has the popularity. It's a big fan base. The Wanderers, the only soccer team they have, that finally they are gaining that attention that of professional sports. They're getting there. They also have the Halifax Tides. Halifax is a city that could support a team. But I wish that every province that, for example, Edmonton, Winnipeg, would have a good supportive fan base. You look at Edmonton, for example, it's really hard for them. They didn't have a supportive fan base that, they had like 1,200 fans, and then they completely went down, that they couldn't support the team. And yeah, you're going to see a downfall of FC Edmonton. And a lot of people are going to look at saying, can Edmonton come back to the Canadian Premier League? Well, the problem is, can the Edmonton soccer fans be more supportive and have a good person to actually support of making a team for the Canadian Premier League? And it's basically the same thing to Winnipeg. It's the same thing. But I know it was the owners for the Blue Bombers, for the CFL team, really didn't support that much with Valor FC, and that was the biggest problem for them. I think you just didn't have a good ownership. That was the problem. So I think there could be a new team for Winnipeg in the future for the Canadian Premier League. But we'll see how the future goes. But for the Canadian national team, hoping the best of what's to come in the next round of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And that's full time of the Red Leaf Card. You could follow us on X, Spotify, and YouTube. I'm your host, Jacob, subbing out.